Welcome back to the Tao of Humaning. I'm your host, Dr. Christine San Mikel, and I'm so glad that you're joining us for today's conversation. We're going to be talking about where science meets soul and how, in my experience, science and spirituality can live very happily hand in hand. They do not have to be different things. I teach research classes in a doctoral program for acupuncturists. And in that class, a lot of times, initially, there's a bit of resistance to research. Not always, but there's some pushback because studying acupuncture, it's a whole nother conversation, but studying acupuncture within the Western medical model has a certain set of challenges, and it tends to not be oftentimes how we treat in clinic. That's changed a lot in recent years. They're getting a lot more quality and more realistic studies out there. Anyway, what I talk to my students about, though, is this idea of true scientific method really is coming from a place of being curious about the world around us and very open to learning and seeing results show up that are oftentimes somewhat surprising, right? There's a sense of openness and capacity to take a set of data, regardless of what we hope that it will say, and being able to accept the results, repeat the study, and then see if we get the same results, right? There's a bit of that exploratory nature to the scientific method, right? And I think ultimately science comes from a place of wanting to understand the world around us, right? And our place within that world. And how do we take our experiences, whether it's something in our physiology or something in our culture, whatever it is that's being studied, and how do we then learn and grow and then go explore some other things? There's a whole way that the mind of what I think of as a true scientist is very open and exploratory. And so I wanted to share a little bit about why I think it's so important to consciously develop this quality of openness. Partially because when we're asked to, or when we feel like we need to choose a side or pick a lane, right? There's a way that it can be a little bit disorienting because a lot of times our actual lived experience is not going to line up exactly with a particular lane or a side, right? Or same thing in a research study, right? Like the results from a research study have certain controls in place that help to get more clear data. It also doesn't always translate exactly to a real life lived experience. Is that making sense? Same thing when I was in my doctoral program. The cases that we learned about in our diagnostic methods were laid out in a way that is quote unquote textbook, right? This is what this pattern looks like. These are all the signs and symptoms you'll observe. This is what the tongue and the pulse will look like, which I'm happy to share about also in this space with you all. How we use tongue and pulse as a diagnostic tool in our medicine. It's pretty fabulous. But also, when a patient comes into the clinic and is sitting in front of me and sharing their story, there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of complexity there that the textbooks are not sharing about, right? Which is how we develop over time that clinical experience and that expertise to be able to see, okay, this is the pattern. Here's where we're really finding the root of the pattern. And if we treat the root, then we're going to be able to both address the symptoms and be able to help this person to not develop that same pattern again. Anyway, digress a little bit. But my point is that the textbook, lane, the way that we were taught is to inform part of our clinical picture, right? And if you're looking at modern day understanding of evidence-based practice, one of the sides of the triangle is the practitioner's clinical experience, right? The other is going to be the scientific studies and what the literature has taught us so far, our current understanding of things. And then the other side of the triangle is going to be the patient's lived experience and essentially the context in which we're wanting to implement this change. Making sense so far? Bringing this back to science and spirit living together, there's a way that when we study our experience as humans, there's more at play, right? Like, we all know this. We're not a textbook. Like, all of the things that go into making me as a person sitting here today talking to you give me different ingredients, so to speak, to create. And with those ingredients, I'm going to create the recipe of my life. And that's going to be, different than even someone in my own family, right? Like, my brother has his own experiences and his own lived things, his own ingredients some are similar and some are different, right? And he's going to be creating his own recipes based on the ingredients that he has, right? Like, this makes so much sense to me. When I was, okay, we're going to have a little story time. When I was going to my undergrad, I was a very type A, very science-oriented young lady. I wanted evidence and I wanted facts. And then I went to study in Southern California in Claremont, and I chose a major that was pre-med, plus it also had requirements in sociology, psychology, and anthropology. And this is where I want to start to lay the groundwork of, when I talk about having a lifetime of curiosity about humans and how we are in the world. This is a big turning point for me in, how that showed up. So I'm studying pre-med, also studying how humans interact in the world and how we relate together and how we relate in our mental health. At that same time, I took an elective called Nature, Movement, and Meditation, which I heard was interesting and an easy A. Sounded great. And it was taught by this Qigong master from China. I had no idea what that meant at the time. I had some friends who took the class and said it was cool. Great. And I signed up, took the class. That class really was pivotal in changing my entire way of being, really. I mean, it sounds like dramatic to say, but I walked into that class, this very science lady, and then it ended up being a Qigong class. And we were learning exercise movements and meditation and breath work to feel the energy in our own body, basically to get in touch with our own selves. And I was so amazed by what I saw, what I witnessed in myself and in others. I ended up studying with that teacher for my last 2 years of my undergrad. And I ended up doing my very sciencey biology thesis, presentation, like research paper on Qigong. And I went and I taught Qigong to a group of people in the community who had Parkinson's disease and their caregivers, because to me, again, it was like, oh, this is a very human moment. Someone has Parkinson's, they have a caretaker. That's going to be very challenging for both of them for different reasons, right? So I looked at quality of life, taught them the Qigong, looked at the data, presented this poster project for my senior thesis to graduate, and left school being like, oh, wow, like this is what I want to do. It took me a little while to actually commit to owning that ultimately, there were a lot of stories that I had built up about, oh, why don't you, um, well, one story was like, well, you're smart enough. Why don't you be a real doctor? But I was like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I should be a real doctor, right? And that's what we were talking about last episode about having too many inputs, right? Too many outside influences, um, although well intentioned, were kind of leading me to question what I already really knew deep, deep, deep in my heart. And there was a part of me that had to reconcile those pieces. So, in essence, looking back, that was actually a wonderful thing that I was able to have those questions brought to me because it did bring more clarity once I did decide to go down the path of, becoming a doctor of Chinese medicine. But there was a lot of cultural stories and different things that I had to overcome of like, well, but this is like a medicine about energetics and like you can't really, what am I going to do? Stick needles in people and then like elicit change in their physiology? Turns out yes. But coming to find peace with those two seemingly different sides really has been a common theme kind of throughout my life. And even today, like I have a wonderful acupuncture practice. I help people every day improve their health on a physiological level. And I also see them having more balance in their emotions and feeling more resourceful and more able to cope and manage in their lives and even thrive in their lives through challenging things. And, all of these amazing things, right? Very energetic level. I also teach Qigong classes to women about learning about their bodies and their physiology. And I also teach research classes. So I still have that. I've carried that love of both worlds with me since, it's been 30 years since I first took those classes that had me open my eyes to see how much more there is available when we allow life to be not in a box. I don't know grammatically if that was a great sentence, but yeah, I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. It's like the more that we try to limit ourselves, put ourselves in a lane, this is also a conversation getting into like what are useful identities that we choose in our lives. That could be another episode that we do together. Um, but having the sense of honoring the complexity of life and having a little pause for maybe there's more that we don't understand, right? There's that story of the six blind men and the elephant, right? And all these six blind men walk up to this elephant and they all touch a different part of it, but they're touching it. So they physically have a felt sensation of reality, right? One of them touches the leg and it's like, oh, this elephant is very much like a tree trunk, right? Another one touches the tail. That's like, oh, this elephant is very much like a snake, right? Or the trunk. I don't remember the exact parts, but the essence is there's always more to the elephant than what we can see, right? Even in scientific discovery, it's like, okay, this is what we know given these inputs and these parameters in this moment in this time, right? Most good science is going to be open to that changing because there can be more discoveries that are happening as we're going through life, right? That applies everywhere, right? Very much looking at, where is it in our day-to-day lives that we're feeling like a this or that, right? Like it has to be either information or it has to be intuition. It can't be both, right? There's so many, looking back on my life, there's so many instances where things didn't make sense on paper, right? Like even me going to that school, like I grew up in Maine. My whole family was there for generations. And then I decide I'm going to move to Southern California and go to college was really pretty unheard of. And it honestly didn't quite make sense on paper, but I knew I had that deep felt sense knowing there was some reason that I had to go there, right? And gosh, I can't even imagine if I hadn't listened to that intuition, if I had talked to myself out of it with like a rational, logical facts of like why, you know, I could just go to a great school in New England and be close to family and, do these different things, right? But that wasn't what my intuition was telling me. And being able to see that pretty immediately, and then being able to refine that listening tool over the years really has enriched my world and the world of the people around me. And so, what I would love is for you to think about where in your life are you putting yourself in a box? Or where are you feeling like there might be room, a little bit of wiggle room to be able to expand and explore something else? And that could be something that you explore on a walk, or it could be a conversation. It could be just something that you think about, I wonder where I might be able to feel more open. Or I wonder where I could hear my intuition a little bit more clearly, right? Especially if you have a health challenge going on, right? Or project. Oftentimes I'll talk to patients about health challenges and looking at them not as like a problem that needs to be solved, but looking at them as a project, because partially that has a little bit less of an identity making piece to it. But looking at a health project, like maybe you want to look at regulating your cycle so that you can be pregnant and bring a baby home. Or maybe your A1C is high and you want to take on the project of improving how your body processes insulin, right? Or whatever it is, right? Sometimes there are things that we can have as projects, and sometimes there are things in life that show up that are more like a gym, like they're there to make us strong. We don't have as much control over those things. Well, where we can, looking at what could be a project and where might you be able to explore using both science and your intuition and allowing some quiet for those things to kind of sit and see where they land. Because a lot of times, especially nowadays, it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm going to go online, I'm going to use AI and I'm going to ask all these questions. And there are incredible resources out there. Don't get me wrong. I am not anti using all the resources. I am pro building discernment so that you're not looking at things from a place of overwhelm and you're able to actually sit with things and see, okay, how would that, like, what do I hear when I ask myself inside? And then sometimes you may not get an answer right away, and that's okay too. It can be a little bit unsettling at first for people to like, oh, I want to know the answer. What I get that. I get that too. I get it. My husband and I joke that it's like a very like Sagittarius thing. We want like the thing right now. We want the answer. We want it to happen now. So it's training, right? It's training yourself and teaching, allowing yourself space to just be uncomfortable and not have the answer yet and keep asking the question, right? Keep asking and then keep being open to hearing what shows up, right? That's the intuitive side. It's like you can do the research and you can talk to the experts in your world, and you can also have an input of your own intuition and see what that says, right? I think the invitation for this week will be to go through the week and notice where are one or two places where you are feeling like you want to rush through and get the answer or know something that just isn't quite there yet. And where can you create a little bit of space and maybe a little bit of asking? And then wait and see how that shows up in how that answer comes. Does that sound good? Sounds good to me. I'm so grateful that you joined us today or joined me today. Um, and I look forward to our next visit next week. If you're enjoying the conversations here, please follow along so that you'll get notified when a new episode releases. And I will look forward to seeing you next time.